This is Grandmaster Bryan Smith with ChessLessons.com, and this is the second part of my series on my games from the St. Petersburg March tournament, played in St. Petersburg, Florida. This was a second round game, played against Tony Norris, player rated around 2000. I had the white pieces and I started with the move e4. Tony played c5, knight f3, g6. So this is a hyper-accelerated dragon, and here I played a move I've played recently a few times. Well, not so recently because the COVID virus has interrupted chess for the last year, but before that, in the previous year. Bishop c4, which looks like a very innocent kind of move. Just preparing to castle. It looks almost like a beginner's move, but it has some ideas behind it. And it's rather appropriate to meet Black's g6. It keeps Black out of his typical positions of a dragon or Benoni nature. So here, Black played bishop g7, and now I played c3. So the idea is to build up the pawn center with d4 before Black has a chance to hit back in the center quickly. And the position of the bishop on c4 stops Black from easily playing d5 in response. So here Black played e6, which is usually played, at least very frequently played in this position. Black prepares at the right moment to play d5, breaking up the center and attacking the white bishop, gaining a foothold in the center. This has the downside, though, that it creates a certain weakness around these squares, and it does block this bishop in, at least temporarily. So this may not necessarily be a big problem for Black, but it can be, if White plays in certain ways, it can turn out that way. So here I played d4. This way I try to play energetically to prevent Black from just getting an easy game. Black needs to take on d4, and here is one of the ideas of the line. I castled. So rather than recapturing the pawn, which would have been met by d5, and Black has achieved what he was looking for, he will easily equalize the game. Whether it's with both sides having isolated queen pawns, Black's position pieces will be very well placed for that kind of structure. But rather, I castled, leaving Black in a temporary quandary. He can take on c3 and have an extra pawn, but after knight takes c3, this is a very nice kind of looking Smith-Morra gambit. Black has delayed the development of his pieces to capture this pawn, and the position is opened up. When we compare this to a Smith-Morra, Black has played some way of development that's not usually used in that opening. So first of all, the bishop coming to g7 and this pawn on e6, this is rather risky because now we can really feel the weakness of the d6 square. White's already getting ideas to play knight b5 and come in with a check there. Also, bishop f4 is going to be coming. And it's pretty clear that White has, if in the Smith-Morra maybe not quite enough compensation, here White has more than enough compensation. So most people won't take on c3. And Tony decided to immediately hit back in the center with d5, which was the idea of the e6 move, but this was premature. It allows White to get to a very nice kind of position because Black's not quite ready to castle. So he has to make some concessions in order to castle. Much better is to play knight e7, getting ready to castle and keeping the chance to play d5 for later. Now if I take on d4, Black can certainly play d5 here. He's ready to castle in one move. There are no checks on the e-file. And because the bishop's under attack and the pawn on e4, White doesn't get to play e5. So the White has to take on d5, and then Black can again be very happy with this kind of position. He castles, he puts his knight on c6. He can pin the white knight, so he has even knight f5, so he can build up a lot of pressure on d4. His pieces are very well placed for this kind of position. So knight e7 was a better move. White doesn't have to take back immediately on d4, but that's a different game. In any case, he played d5 here, which was a serious mistake. E takes d5. Black has to take back. E takes d5, and now bishop b5 check. So if Black gets developed, he would have an okay isolated queen pawn position, but White's going to disturb Black's development. So first with this check, bishop d7, and I thought this was a bit of a mistake. I thought knight c6 was better. he should avoid the exchange of the light squared bishops, which, as we see, weakens his position further, as we'll see later. I was going to just play knight takes d4, threatening the knight on c6. He plays knight e7, and now bishop g5. This was my intention. Again, keeping black from castling because of bishop takes c6, b takes c6, knight takes c6 is a threat. This knight is pinned. So black would have to take time out to stop that, and basically white's also going to play rook e1 on the next move. So basically black will have to play f6 either now or bishop d7, rook e1, f6, so better just to play it right away. But this is a move you really don't want to have to make. Permanently weakens this square on e6, blocks out the bishop. Certainly later in the game black could play f5 and open the bishop up again, but that would then create new weaknesses and block some more pieces. So I think white should be very happy with the opening here, but then again black will castle and the game goes on. Instead bishop d7 was played, so now I kept playing. Again, I don't want to just, I can get a small advantage by trading on d7 and taking back on d4. It would be a nice position to play against the isolated queen pawn. But there's more that white can get. I like to induce some weaknesses, so that's why I played bishop g5. So here black played f6. If he moves his queen, of course, rook e1 would be very unpleasant. So it was either this or knight e7. If knight e7, I can just play rook e1, forcing the same position as in the game. Well, I also have the option maybe to take on e7 as well, when he would have to take with his king, because otherwise rook e1. So he played f6. And now rook e1 check and knight e7. So black has to walk into this pin. I did this for tactical reasons. I played rook e1. I want to make sure he doesn't have, well, you'll see later that the queen is cut off from going to e7. It may sound silly, but we'll see in a moment. If he moved his king to f7, this would leave white's two pieces under attack, as well as black having an extra pawn, but here white has knight e5. Which is just devastating, because if the knight is captured, the black queen is lost, the f-pawn is pinned. And of course king f8 is also real bad. White can take on d7 and then play bishop f4. So, and of course king f8 is also not good here. Black loses the right to castle. White takes d7, black takes back, bishop f4. White's about to take on d4. Black can take the pawn and have an extra pawn, but that's a small satisfaction here for the kind of position that black has. He'll certainly lose the pawn back very quickly, and his position is just a disaster. So instead, after rook e1, knight e7 was played, the natural move, and here knight takes d4. White really has to be a little bit accurate here. I had to calculate, because if I just take on d7, the queen takes back, and now my bishop is hanging, and I can move my bishop, but then he might take on c3, and he's still ready to castle. So for instance, bishop d7, simple move, and then queen d7, the bishop's under attack, so I have to deal with that, and then take c3, knight c3 castle. Certainly white has compensation, lots of compensation, but even if black has to give back his d-pawn, which I'm sure he will at some point, he has reasonable chances to equalize. So instead, it was better to continue energetically with knight takes d4. So now the idea is that the knight is coming to e6. Now we see why I inserted rook e1. In some cases, if the knight were still on g8 and rook on f1, then black might be able to take, and after knight e6, play queen e7 and protect the bishop on g7. Well, this was actually possible for white to play that way, but this was just more accurate, I think. So here, black decided to just castle, which kind of gives up the fight for getting a reasonable position after the opening, because now I can just move my bishop away and I have all the advantages of the position with no risk. But the other moves were not really that good. If he takes the bishop on g5, the point is knight e6, attacks the black queen, and the bishop is pinned on d7. And now sacrificing the queen for 3 pieces, this is not really sufficient for black, because he has 3 pieces for the queen, but his position is terrible in every other way. His king won't find safety, and his pieces are not coordinated. The d-pawn and the g-pawn are weak, so this is very bad for black. If instead, after knight e6, the queen moves, then I'm going to take on g7. So for instance, queen b6, knight takes g7, king f7, and then I can just remove this bishop from capture, from being on pre, and then bring my knight out to e6, and material is still equal. Black's g-pawn is hanging, and his king is in terrible shape. Both also his knights are vulnerable after a check on g5. So Black's position is hopeless here. He could also try bishop takes b5 when I can't take on b5 because my bishop on g5 is now hanging. So again, this is another way of taking a piece temporarily. Knight e6. And here the queen has a little bit more possible moves than before, but she still doesn't have any good option. Queen d7 was what I thought, what I calculated, what I expected, because other moves like queen d6 runs into bishop f4. And queen b6 leaves the knight on e7 unguarded, so white doesn't have to worry about then immediate capture on g7. So best of queen d7, knight takes g7, king f7. And this may look bad at first for black, but it was actually what I was thinking was best. I saw that I have at minimum simple queen f3, attacking the pawn on f6, so black can't take the knight. And black would have to play knight f5, and then white doesn't have anything better than just trading and going into the ending, which is of course a very ugly ending for black, with an isolated d pawn and doubled f pawns. But there are upside colored bishops, so black has chances to hold here. My intuition told me that there should be something better, and in fact there is. White can just take on f6. And black has to take, otherwise the position is terrible. And then queen to d4 check. And it's easy to see that white's attack is incredibly strong. After king f7 and knight e6, now queen g7 or queen takes h8 are threats. Black has to protect against queen g7 with rook g8. And now knight g5, king e8, knight takes h7. And white has now 2 pawns for the piece, but also the knight is coming to f5, so white's going to win more material with to f6, so white's going to win more material next. Black can run the king away, but white's going to take the exchange and continue to attack. This position is just winning for white. There are a couple other ways white could play as well, besides bishop takes f6, but this looks like the best. So black decided to just castle, which maybe objectively was the best move, but white now has an easy advantage. So I played bishop f4. And here now bishop takes b5 was another mistake, after which black can't come back. Black has no chance of saving the game. This move is not a really move you should consider because it just helps to develop white's play. White's pieces move into more aggressive positions. But better for black was to play knight b to c6, just developing the knight, challenging d4. And black's position with the isolated queen pawn it's not a good position for this kind of structure with the bishop on g7, first of all. Then this move is also very serious weakness, and white's pieces are ideally placed. It seems that Tony was afraid of knight e6, taking the 2 bishops, but I think this was a concession that black should be happy to make, because after this trade, maybe now queen to b6 or something like that, and rook e8, and black has some active play in return for the 2 bishops, or if not queen b6, maybe queen to d7, but in any case, or even knight f5, actually, perhaps with sacrificing the pawn on c6. But in any case, black's play is at least semi-reasonable. I probably would have just played knight a3 instead, developing a piece. And if he takes d4, then my bishop is guarded on b5. And white keeps a lot of pressure. Black's position is very difficult to play because all of his pieces are tied up on the e-file, and his d-pawn is weak. And the e6 square is weak, but it's still a game. So instead, black took on b5, knight takes b5, and now there's an immediate problem that the knight is going to come into c7. And it's not just that the knight will trap the rook, but even if black plays knight, let's say knight b to c6, then knight c7 threatens one rook, and also threatens the other with a fork. So black had to make the very awkward move knight a6, which puts the knight on the side of the board and also means that he can never drive white's knight out of b5. So here white can already win the pawn on d5 by playing bishop d6. And after black protects the knight on e7, then trading twice and taking on d5. But that's pretty good for white, but I don't want to trade off my developed pieces, and I think this position is worth more than just that one pawn. I want to take I'm sure I will win the pawn eventually anyway, and I want to do it in better circumstances. So I just developed with knight to a3. And the knight could go there, but also it could go to d2, but in any case, if black didn't do anything immediately that gave me better options, I was going to go knight c2 and knight d4. Either way, it's going to get to d4 one way or another. But I keep the knight out of the d file by going by this route. So here black played knight c6, which allows me now to win the d pawn in very ideal circumstances. But the position was going to be hopeless anyway. My next moves were going to be probably queen f3 or queen e2, of course, depending on what black does, but bringing the queen out, rook to d1, and there will be great pressure on this pawn, which I could take at any moment, and I can also bring the other knight, again, like I said, toward e6, which black can hardly stop. So instead, black played knight c6, and now came knight to d6, which cuts the queen off from guarding the pawn and also attacks that pawn. So knight c7, I can take the pawn on b7. d4, I could check and take the exchange by knight f7, or I could just take the pawn, which I didn't know which one I was going to do, but they were both very good for white. So instead, black played queen to d7. I took on d5, king h8, and now rook a to d1. So white has just centralization and the control of the center, an extra pawn, more active pieces, and black's game is hopeless. But it's not time yet to resign, so black played rook a to d8, knight a to c4, bring the other knight in. Knight b5 was also, knight 1 to b5 was also worth considering, but this was very natural to me. Now queen to g4, bishop g3, and here black played rook d7, just trying to double the rooks in the d file. Knight c7 wouldn't have done much good, just queen c5, for instance, would be a good answer. And black's position is hopeless here. So he went rook d7. I played h3. Simplest way was just to drive the queen away, exchange the queens, which, well, it's going into an ending, but black is not going to last long in this ending because white has not only the extra pawn, it's not really just that, but the pieces are controlling everything. So now knight e4 now attacks the pawn on g5 and threatens the exchange to take the rook on d7. Here black played rook f to d8, giving up another pawn. But if rook takes d1, rook takes d1, and then if he protected the pawn with h6, then rook to d7. And this position is completely hopeless for black. White's rook is attacking the queenside pawns, and black will surely lose another pawn over there. And the knights are dominating the game. The bishop is very well placed. Meanwhile, black's pieces are not working at all. So it's more than just an extra pawn there. Black played rook f to d8. I traded on d7, and now I took on g5. And here black resigned because now it's 2 pawns up, and rook e8 is a threat. Black can't stop that with rook d8 because of knight f7. And even h6 is met by rook e8. It's a hopeless game for black. This showed, well, it was kind of a tricky opening, and it showed some ideas of how to play this kind of open game.